Welcome to Funds for NGOs exclusive course on how to write an effective project proposal for CSR funding. At Funds for NGOs, we empower organizations with the knowledge and resources to maximize funding opportunities. This course is designed to equip you with essential strategies and tools to craft compelling CSR proposals that resonate with corporate partners and drive impactful social projects. Whether you're a beginner or looking to refine your skills, this course will guide you through every step.
Hello and welcome to the course on how to write an effective project proposal for CSR funding. Fundraising seems to be a challenge for most development sector agencies. We are in the business of doing impactful work for the communities we work with, contributing and solving world's largest problems and supporting the most marginalized communities to lead good quality of life. Very often it is said that it is government's responsibility to ensure good quality of life for all. But uniformity and being systems driven very often is what the government agencies face challenges for too. Helping them in this mission is therefore a key role that is played by innovating strategies and field testing them for their validity before they can be implemented at the mass level. And corporates, through corporate social responsibility, support the NGOs and or the communities by investing a part of their profit towards the business responsibility towards communities and society as a whole. NGOs through CSR partnerships and the corporates do the above well, and NGOs understand the needs of such communities as well. One of the ways to convince and support the corporates achieve the above better is through sharing an effective CSR proposal with them, one that presents the needs of the communities and encourages the corporate to invest in the community project and in turn achieve their CSR goals too. So in this course, let us try and learn about how to develop an effective CSR proposal. Before I move forward, let me introduce your course trainer and voiceover assistant for this video to you. Your course trainer is Mr. Gopal Kumar Jain. He has been working in the development sector for over 28 years now, specializing in fundraising, branding and communications, and project management. He has worked with a number of reputed development sector organizations, institutions, national NGO, a celebrity-led foundation, and a for-profit company. He specializes in CSR and HNI fundraising. Currently, he is leading fundraising primarily from large corporates for a national knowledge institution in India. The content of this course is primarily based on the experiences of the trainer who has raised CSR funds from hundreds of corporates during the 28 years of career in the development sector. The voiceover assistant is Ms. Vidushi Jain, a graduate in Media and Communications from Symbiosis International University, Center of Media and Communications in Pune, India. She has finished her Masters in Criminology from a National Institute in New Delhi, India, and worked for the cause of protection of child rights. She has led her voice for over 25 different training courses and several teach and learn video materials, and thus is a perfect voiceover assistant for this course. Now, coming back to the course, it has 8 chapters. Chapter 1 is an introductory one, and the last chapter would share effective tips. The rest of the chapters would help you design one section of the CSR proposal in a sequential manner. Private, limited, and public sectors. It's also important to understand there are two different types of companies who usually fund projects under CSR: private limited companies and public sector companies. Though, for a few minor details, the overall CSR proposal formats for both are similar. There are other kinds of entities too, like proprietorship firms, limited liability companies, that is LLPs, which are usually not obliged to follow the CSR rules or norms. However, such businesses may also be interested to fund your work if the proposal is comprehensively presented and appeals to them. Some preparatory tasks. Before you start working on the CSR proposal, it is important for you to undertake a secondary research. The first aspect of the above research would be to understand more about the corporates for whom you plan to approach the proposal. You must learn about their business type, priorities, geographical presence, CSR policy if they have one, and the finances. It is advisable that their operational geography matches with your project location, as most corporates like to carry out their CSR work in and around their geographical presence. However, this may not be true in all cases. Their finances will help you understand how much are they already investing in CSR and would give you an idea of available or desirable support or resources that they wish to invest. This will help you understand if there is more scope and what could be your project size. Their CSR policy will help you frame and craft your proposal so that it appeals better to them. Thus, the above research would be extremely useful in drafting your proposal. CSR focus. Next important aspect to be checked about the corporate is their CSR focus. CSR work of the corporate is mostly guided by a CSR policy that you can download from the corporate website. You can also do a Google search for the same. From the policy, list the CSR focus, specifically the sector and any specific beneficiary type. In most cases, these are explicitly written in the policy. But in case it is not, go back to the corporate website and try and gather information on projects funded in the past, and based on this, note the CSR focus. Please note, however impactful your project proposal may be, but if it does not align with the CSR focus, you are bound to receive a regret message. Thus, try and align it as closely as possible. Concluding remarks. if you have done the above research well, then by now you would know the corporate, their CSR focus, geographical preferences, if any, and the ticket size. Let's now, between Chapter 2 to Chapter 6, build the proposal for the CSR funding. Hello and welcome to the course on how to write an effective project proposal for CSR funding. As I mentioned in the previous chapter, from Chapter 2 to Chapter 6, each chapter will be a section in the CSR proposal in the sequence we talk about. The first section in the proposal is the organizational details, and we shall discuss here what all must be included in proposal for CSR funding. Subsection A, Basic Details. Organizational details would have various subsections, and the first subsection would be Basic Details of the organization. Basic details would further include registration details of the organization, such as registered name, registration date, address at which registered, registration number, and any specific CSR registration number. That is, for example, in India, any NGO interested in conducting CSR projects should have a CSR registration number from the Ministry of Corporate Affairs. Thus, check if there are any specific such regulations in your country, and if so, include the relevant details. Second, organizational finances and donation details. This would include average annual turnover and average amount for the specific theme. Average of number of years depends again on the policy in the respective countries. For example, it's for 3 years in India. If there are no such mentioned information in your country, you could default use for 3 years. Other important information is the list of donors for the organization and specifically for this particular theme. If for your organization this list is too long, then you can use up to 20 major donors. Subsection B, Management Details. This section is important as it shares information of who is behind the organization and thus adds credibility to the organization. There are 3 kinds of information to be shared here. First, founders' names. Second, director or CEO name as per the board. Third, board members, including their names, terms of office, and frequency of meeting in a financial year. Subsection C, Organizational Work Details. This section further emphasizes on the reasons as to why are you interested in the proposed project. This section also explores your team's capability on the same. Key information included in this section are vision and mission of the organization, key partners. You would need to include names of key partners, and you can further subgroup them as UN agencies, multilateral organizations, bilateral organizations, government, foundations and CSR programs, universities and knowledge organizations, NGOs and civil society organizations. Third, impact in the last 3 years, including number of people impacted or number of beneficiaries, tangible and intangible impacts. History of the organization. Last section under organizational details seeks information about the history of your organization. This should be presented in a chronological or annual manner. Typically, this section would begin with the date when your organization was registered. Remember to include any specific event activity that is linked to the project. For example, if your project is on water and sanitation, then you must include when was the first project undertaken on water and sanitation, or any specific partnership was undertaken related to the proposed theme of the project. With this, we come to an end of Chapter 2. Hello and welcome to Chapter 3, that is, of the course on how to write an effective project proposal for CSR funding. As the chapter title signifies, in this chapter we will focus on the content or thematic part of the project proposal. For ensuring that your proposal is effective, it is important that you clearly present what is your proposal wishing to achieve. Why is this target or goal important? Remember that the reasons of this being important must be linked with the priorities of the prospective donor agency. Only then would this appeal to them. And only then would your proposal be able to catch the donor's attention. To make this happen, I would like to share key elements and their interconnected aspects that you must cover in this section of the proposal. Key elements. In about the proposed project, there are 3 key elements to be covered: the problem, proposed solution, and the target group that you propose to work with. Let us discuss these one by one in detail. Problem statement. While talking about the problem, 3 aspects should be covered, one each as a subsection. First aspect is the problem statement. While building your problem statement, begin with data or policy quote to show that this is of national or international significance too. This may be followed by a similar situation and or target audience or geography that the proposed project is wishing to address. In the next paragraph, talk about the status of this problem in your specific target audience or geography. This is to be followed by dissecting and getting into more specifics of the problem. Add specifics only to the limit that you will be addressing under the proposed solution. For example, if your project is related to solid waste management in a specific town or city, and that your project proposes to handle then different kinds of waste while describing the problem, your proposal must discuss about the status of each kind of waste. Problem areas addressed in your proposal. The second aspect about the problem is to describe which development areas does your proposal address. To begin with, the proposal could share some statistics on the current situation in the concerned geographical location, and later the proposal could also describe those problems specifically that you plan to address through the project. Relation of the problem with global and national priorities. It is also important to establish the national or global significance of the problem being addressed in your proposal. So its alignment with, say, the national development priorities or with the relevant SDGs would be crucial to establish the need and significance of the issue being addressed. This is important as each corporate wishes to be seen as an agency contributing towards national goals and priorities. Funding such projects are useful for their business too, specifically to be seen working with the government and addressing national priorities. Proposed solution. Under the element proposed solution, again, couple of aspects will be covered, and the first aspect is on the solution that you propose. Start with exact solution that you are proposing in bullet points. This needs to be very specific. For the solid waste management example, under bullet points, mention what is your solution for each kind of waste management. After the bullet points, add a brief description about your strategy for each of the points mentioned above. And at the end, do add evidence that your organization has expertise in dealing with this in particular. Your proposal may provide example of similar previous work if done. This ensures that you are not just making pyramid of cards, but exactly know what you are proposing and can be successfully undertaken. You must also add justifications for what you just mentioned. This could be, say, you already have spoken to the authority and community and they are eager to implement your solution, or you may present a baseline study that you have already undertaken, etc. Geography and its need. Other aspects to be included as subsections under the proposed solution is about the geography specifics that you will cover and the specific needs of that geographical setup. This section should justify how the solution or strategy proposed by you would bring improvement or change in the given geographical situation. Target group. Third key element under the problem is about the target group and their needs. This element can be broken into two subsections again. One, each for two aspects mentioned, target groups and the specific needs of the target group. Justification stated here must also have correlation with the needs that you stated in the previous section on geographical situation. Note that target or beneficiary group can be more than one type and also include few direct and few indirect ones. If you have both in significant numbers, present it separately along with the numbers. This is also important as many of the corporate CSRs would want to know the per beneficiary cost, and higher numbers help present lower per capita spends or better impacts. Presenting needs of the target group is important as it then signifies that when the project will be implemented, there will be higher ownership of the project and thus sustainability and exit strategy could be planned and undertaken. With this, we have now completed our second subsection of the CSR fundraising proposal about the proposed project. This being one of the earliest section of the proposal, but since it lays down the need of the project, it's important that the donor gets convinced that this is an important issue to address. Hello and welcome to the chapter 4 on the course How to Write an Effective Project Proposal for CSR Funding. In the previous chapter on the proposed project, we presented the problem and the solution, and thus donor now has a clear view on what you want to achieve through the proposed project. The next question for the donor is, what is your model to achieve the solution that you proposed? That is, how would you implement the solution? And while you implement the planned strategy, what are the risks involved? The donor needs to be convinced that what you have proposed is possible to achieve and you are aware about the hurdles and also know how to mitigate the same. Thus, this chapter on proposed model and expected risks would give you an idea on how to present the aspects that you must cover in the proposal so as to convince the CSR donor about the model or strategy that is proposed in the project. The proposed model. First point to cover under this section is what is your proposed model, that is solution. This should be presented again in bullet points or in a visual manner, elaborating upon what exactly is it that you propose to do in the project. Going back to the example of solid waste management, if the goal is zero waste to landfill, you have to exactly say what are you going to do and how would your project handle each kind of waste so as to achieve zero waste to the landfill. You may say like, we'll do an IEC campaign to promote waste segregation and then do composting of wet waste, sell or recycle dry waste, upskill SHGs for textile waste, incinerate medical waste, send other waste to material recovery center, etc. Key elements, approach and the USP. Besides sharing the exact model, it's important to describe how will you achieve each of these. First, pick up each point you mentioned in the model and describe the detailed process of implementing each of these elements. For example, for IEC campaign, describe what all IEC materials you will use for each of your target audience and how will you conduct campaigns for each of them. Next, what is your approach of implementation? For example, you may initiate partnership with specific institution or organization. You may initiate some monitoring mechanisms to ensure your implementation or engage some specific experts, etc. Finally, what is your unique selling proposition or USP? This is usually different from the regular business process. USP makes your project unique and different, and this is what a donor is looking into while investing in your project. Remember, your corporate donor gets hundreds of proposals, and thus they must be convinced of why they should invest in your project and not others. Think about what is different that you can propose that will make your proposal stand out from others. An important aspect to focus in this section is also on sustainability of the project and the exit strategy. No corporate donor will like to invest time immemorial. What will happen once you exit from the project, and how will you ensure the sustainability of the project? That is, actions will continue even after you exit from the project should also be highlighted. Next subsection within your proposed models must be on the resources required. Again, this helps corporate donors to evaluate your understanding about what kinds of resources are required and what is further existing and what more is additionally required from the implementation of your solution. Key points to be included here are human resource. How many people are required to implement the project? While sharing this, also include how many people of what kind of skills will be required, and if not full time, what would be their frequency. Second, team. Describe the team who will be involved in implementing the project. Do share what kind of experiences do these team members possess so that capability of the team is convincing for project implementation. Third, infrastructure in place. Must describe kind of infrastructure that is already available and will be utilized for the project. Remember, many of the corporate donors do not want to fund lot of capital expenses, and thus this clarifies the corporate donor that available infrastructure will be used for the project and their money is not utilized for the same. Fourth, sources of funding. Corporate donors would want to see their money being utilized effectively. Thus, share who all will be contributing for the project, either in form of additional infrastructure, services, contributions from community, and any other resources, etc. Balance could be part of CSR funding. Corporate donor wants to be convinced that in addition to the funds being asked for the project, rest all is or will be available. Other partnerships in place. Any addition to the partnership with the corporate donor, state here what all is already in place and additionally what will be undertaken for the project. Success indicators. Including success indicators helps the corporate donor to understand how will you ensure and measure the success of the project. Some key aspects to be included here are measuring success. Here, describe what will describe the success. Again, as far as possible, this should be tangible and thus can be quantified and measured. For example, in case of solid waste management proposed, tons of waste that is currently leaching the landfill and tons of waste that will get diverted from the landfill to achieve the goal of 100% diversion from landfill, or through IEC evaluating how behavior of community changed. Monitoring, evaluation and learning. Describe what kinds of systems, processes will monitor and evaluate the project success and how learnings can be further available from the project. Periodicity of the monitoring process like weekly, monthly, quarterly, etc. must also be mentioned, and the person responsible for each should also be mentioned. If there are specific meetings to be organized for this, they must also be specified. Usually, the corporate donors ask reports at monthly, quarterly, or 6 months and annual level, but they would like to know about daily or weekly processes followed by you for monitoring of activities. We must also share how the learnings are documented and will be later available to understand the complete story of the project. Review. We must also review process of what is being available from monitoring, evaluating and learning. For this again, frequency and responsible person under each must be specified. Implementation plan. A detailed implementation plan must also be included in this section as it helps corporate donor to understand how the project will progress and what would be done, when and how will the same be implemented. This could include 3 aspects: project duration, exact duration of the project including start, month, year and the end of the project, month and year. Thus, the total duration in months. Key activities. All the project activities must be included here. There is also a Gantt chart added from this, which we will learn in later chapter on how to develop this. Project review. A review process further to revise the status of each activity and overall implementation plan must be suggested. This can be preferably in the form of project steering committee comprising representatives from all stakeholders must be suggested. Expected risks. At the start of the session, we discussed about expected risks. These must be presented in a tabular form stating 3 aspects. Presumed risks. What is the risk? Here mention the specific risk that may happen which will be a hindrance to the project. And for each of the risks, describe the following. What is the likelihood of its occurrence? Frequency or any specific season or time of the year that it is more possible for this risk to occur. Also, chances of how likely it may happen. This could be represented as low likelihood, medium, high or very high likelihood of occurrence. Third, mitigation plan. Under this, first of all, describe what action would be to do so that the likelihood of this risk is minimal. But still, in case this specific risk emerges, how will you handle it? Specifically, what will you do further that it does not impact the project output? Opportunities and failures. Each risk, if properly handled, becomes an opportunity. But simultaneously, if risk emerges to an extent that it jeopardizes the project outcome, then your proposal and plan both are weak. Thus, add such aspects under the risk which shows your understanding and commitment to the project. What are the key opportunities, particularly external, that can further strengthen the project? This could be in form of additional resources from other sources or additional activities by you or other stakeholders that will further positively influence and strengthen likelihood of activities being implemented. Second, what will failure look like? Clearly state what will it mean that the project is a failure. This is a situation that you must try and see doesn't happen, but in case it does, what actions you will undertake so as to mitigate the same. There can also be a state of failure, say for example policy change, etc. But here you have little authority and thus from the start build an initiative that ensures very little likelihood of this to happen. With this, we come to an end of chapter 4. Hello and welcome to the chapter 5 of the course on how to write an effective project proposal for CSR funding. Under the sections Results, logic model is one of the aspects to be included. Let's understand how to build a logic model and what could be other aspects included in the proposal under results. There are 4 components of the logic model, each mentioned in the sequence in a tabular form. Inputs, outputs, outcomes, and impact. For each component, you need to define indicator, numbers, and timeline. This is something how a logic model should look like. Now let's understand each component and what should it include. To start with, let's discuss the first component, which is inputs. Inputs are all activities that you conduct as part of the project. These could be IEC work or advocacy work or actually having a facility constructed, etc. There could be a large head of activity, say IEC, and within this there could be a smaller or sub-activities. For example, if your activity is to develop and raise IEC on solid waste management, then excavation of compost pits, setting up a material recovery facility, forming a self-help group for either running a dry waste collection center or one of making materials out of the cloth waste, each can be a separate input. Also, for each activity head, you will be required to define what are the numbers of the specific inputs and its timelines of conducting. As you may have noticed in the logic model, for each indicator of input, you are required to give corresponding indicator of other 3 outputs, outcomes, and impact. Let's learn this in the next few slides. Outputs. As we all know, every input has an output, and this is what we need to define corresponding to each input indicator. This again would have a corresponding number and time frame. For example, in our earlier example of excavating compost pits, if number of inputs are 8, that is 8 compost pits are excavated, the output will be compost pit excavated and its corresponding number should also be 8. Timeline will be the same as you defined under the specific input indicator. Similarly, define outputs for each input indicators. Now, important is what would be to define the output of the IEC activities. As mentioned earlier, the IEC activities are expected to create awareness towards a specific desired action. Thus, for the IEC activities, there may not be one output for every input indicator. Rather, a combination inputs would be to achieve one or more outputs, such as awareness is created and increased level of desired action is achieved. Outcomes. I found people always getting confused between outputs and outcomes. Let's try and understand it in this manner. As you provide an input, you get an output. But output doesn't mean that it will provide a complete result, that is outcome. For example, just having compost pits doesn't mean that you will get compost. And again, its process and quality will also vary depending upon what you feed in the compost pits. If it's a mixed waste, you will have waste like plastic that never decomposes. Thus, unless waste is properly segregated, compost pits would not function. So, outcome occurs when the output is properly processed and thus depends on the process of action. Same is with IEC activities, and outcome indicator here too is the result achieved, that is proper decomposition and good quality of compost received, which is the desired outcome. Impact. Impact is effectiveness of the intervention that is achieved post proper input, output and outcome. World Bank defines impact as the indicator of interest with and without the intervention, whereas according to OECD, positive and negative, primary and secondary long-term effects produced by a development intervention, directly or indirectly, intended or unintended, is a seemingly limitless definition. In case of waste management example, impact of compost pit example is the wet waste not going to the landfill and thus the corresponding amount gets reduced. Similarly, with the MRF and DWCC, you will further reduce the dry waste not going to landfill. And overall, for all kinds of efforts, impact will be zero waste to landfill. Impact on sustainable development goals. In addition to the logic model we discussed above, there are few other aspects to be included in the results section. One of these is the impacts, both quantitative and qualitative, of the various activities of the project on the specific target within the SDG. This is how this could be presented. For filling this table, review all the 17 SDGs and corresponding targets, as there are 169 targets present, and which of these is your project corresponding to and what is their respective impact is what you need to focus upon. Example of an SDG target. In case of our SWM project, under goal 1, no poverty, as you will be hiring both your project staff and also some labor for waste collection or segregation, you will be contributing to target 1.1, that is employment to local people. Now, quantitative impact is employment to those number of people and qualitative impact is employment itself. This could further be direct and indirect employment depending on the many people who hire as direct, and those further get indirect employment because of project as other type of employment. Additional information. There is some additional information that the donor always wishes to know about a project. This is specifically on strategy for the post-project phase. This is important for the donor also, as they would like the initiative to sustain even after their CSR grant ceases. And also the initiative implemented has potential and scope to further be expanded, that is replicated in other parts. Thus, it's better to include these for a fair judgment by the CSR committee of the corporate. These questions include: how will you communicate impact of the program? How will impact and or learnings be amplified beyond your organization? Describe your exit strategy for the proposed program. Include an estimated time frame. What is your scaling strategy for this project? What will contribute to sustainability of impact? With this slide, we come to an end to chapter 5. Hello and welcome to the chapter 6 of the course on how to write an effective project proposal for CSR funding. In this chapter, we will learn how to make project timeline, that is Gantt chart. This is usually annexed as the annexure 1 of the course. Gantt chart. A Gantt chart is a bar chart that illustrates a project schedule. In the chapter 4, Proposed Model and Expected Risks, we discussed about the implementation schedule. Here, while we discuss about key activities, I mentioned to include all the proposed activities of the project. This, when represented along with project timeline, is when we get a Gantt chart. This is how a Gantt chart looks like. As you may notice, in one column, we mention about all the project activities, and in the corresponding columns, we project the timeline of these activities by shading the particular period. If it's a multi-year project, it's best to use timeline quarter-wise. And if it's less than 2 years, we use timeline as month-wise. With this, we come to an end to chapter 6. Hello and welcome to the chapter 7 of the course on how to write an effective project proposal for CSR funding. All of us who write project proposals understand how to develop a budget for the proposal. Thus, you may feel like you know this section already. Yes, you may know this very well, but from my experience, while I share and discuss the complete format of the budget, this will highlight certain key points which CSR professionals strongly look into the proposal. Let's look at the budget format first and then discuss these aspects. Key heads in a CSR budget. Usually, a CSR budget has following key heads: salaries and consultancies, operating expenses, admin, IEC, and travel. Let's now look at what each head comprises of in the next few slides. Salaries and consultancies. This head must cover remuneration of all persons working or contributing to the project. Salaries of all personnels, heads normally used as project manager, project associate and assistants, field staff including field supervisor, community mobilizer. These are staff who are full-time devoted to the project and thus their remuneration are salaries. Consultancies are for those people who are not full-time staff but contribute few days in a month for the project. These could be subject experts and these could be multiple like communication expert, capacity building expert, etc. Operating expenses. Operating expenses are all costs that are required for operations of the project. This includes all materials cost that are required in the project, project related equipment or services hiring costs, manpower other than salaries and consultancies such as labor costs, volunteer costs, and costs pertaining to them like uniform, food, etc. Cost of personnels other than salary like their on-field training, telephone bills, fuel, on-field food, etc. Any other facilities that are required by the project office. Additionally, while you are developing the budget, any cost that doesn't fit in any other head but is important for project operation may be included here. Admin cost. Admin costs are those costs that directly do not pertain to the project but are essential for supporting the project. Expenses like office rent, furniture, other fixtures in the office, water, electricity, telephone, Wi-Fi and other bills of the office, computer, insurances and all other requirements for all staff, project audit expenses, etc. Even the organization overheads will be part of the admin cost. IEC costs. IEC, that is Information, Education and Communication costs, are the costs, education and awareness regarding the specific topic of the project. In Chapter 5, Results, we discussed about IEC activities and their outputs and outcomes. Costs related to these activities should be included here. Travel cost. Travel costs is all travel related to the project. Within the project, travel by the project full-time staff was already included under fuel cost, under operating cost. This travel is by other than those travels. Note, travel is not always only to the project site. There could be a senior member of the organization visiting the project, visiting donor, or sometime other than project location to other organization, including government, for the benefit of the project or for exploring other partnerships of the project. Some variations. Sometimes donor may suggest budget heads that these are combinations of some of these or even bifurcation. Bifurcation can be done as per donor requirements. A typical combination head is salaries and consultancies, project direct costs, administrative costs. In this case, project direct costs would be a combination of operating expenses and IEC. And in case there is no salaries element, this too can be included in the project direct cost, as each of the staff recruited or expert services hired are directly for the project. And administrative or admin cost will include admin and the travel cost. But overall, all cost heads will broadly be these. However, these are structured. What's key in a CSR budget? Let me share some key insights from my experiences on the CSR budget. Do not make budget exact to the maximum budget amount. This gives an impression to the donor that you are not aware of each cost items and have just manipulated to be exactly of the amount in the budget. My advice will be to keep lower than maximum budget. If maximum budget is 100,000 USD, keep it to around 96,000 USD or max a little lower than 98,000 USD. In nutshell, be genuine in estimating the budget. Keep salaries and consultancies cost less than 30% of total budget and admin less than 15% of the budget. Approximately 60% or even higher could be the project direct cost, out of which IEC should not be more than 15%. CSR team is looking at more benefits going to the communities. If you are adding any organizational overhead, ensure that this is less than 10%. Ideally, CSR team looks at 5% as overheads. Any amount between 5 to 7% is fine. If you are adding miscellaneous expenses, let it be part of operating cost or project direct cost. Finally, try and show the per beneficiary cost. In direct services related projects, CSR team is looking at the lowest per beneficiary cost, and sometimes this is a deciding factor in some such projects. Before we end, let me show you the heads, subheads, and how a budget format would look like. Pause here for a moment to take a note of this. You can even click a photo or a screenshot. Remember, budget is a skill and does involve someone from the finance team to have a look at it and check all details, especially the calculations. Hello and welcome to the 8th chapter of the course on how to write an effective project proposal for CSR funding. In this chapter, I will share some tips for an effective CSR proposal. Know your CSR donor. Before starting with a CSR proposal, it's important that you do an online research to understand your CSR donor. Key questions to evaluate are: what thematic areas they fund, what's their geography of business, and what ticket size they fund under CSR. Go applying for the donor only if each of these matches with your CSR proposal. Solicited or unsolicited proposal. You may be applying for a solicited proposal, that is against a request for a proposal (RFP), or you met the CSR manager and briefed about your work and he requested for a proposal. In case of an RFP, comply with all aspects requested, including words or character limitations if specified in RFP, timeline, etc. In unsolicited proposals, the format shared can be used as it is. It applies also for those solicited proposals where no format is provided. Service delivery and per beneficiary units cost. In most cases, a CSR donor expects to deliver a particular service based on the needs of the community. For example, educate children, develop skill of youth, divert waste from landfill, water tap in each house, etc. Usually, CSR donors do not like to fund such projects. Understand the specific requirement of the donor and focus your proposal accordingly. This must align all through the proposal, including the budget. More funds towards operational cost and less for salaries and admin. Also evaluate and understand per beneficiary unit cost funded by the donor and accordingly develop the budget. For example, in case of waste management, if donor is funding 15 USD per 1 ton, align your project budget to accordingly. Identify the core issue and focus on acceptable solutions. It's important to identify the core issue before proposing your solution for a CSR project. Let me explain with an example. Recently, a donor prospect told me they want me to suggest a CSR project for Goregaon in Mumbai, where their major business is based. They also told me the Mumbai local government don't want them to work on solid waste management, as in past local government told them they are managing this efficiently. Thus, a project which would have buy-in from community, local government as well as corporate management. Further interaction with the corporate, I understood water, sanitation and hygiene is something that may be a useful issue to focus on. Since my NGO was not aware about Goregaon core issues, I suggested first to do an assessment of types of problem and what would be the type of services that community will be happy with. Thus, the proposal was divided into two phases, with assessments with acceptable solutions in the first phase and execution of these solutions in the second. Remember, in case of an RFP, the corporate would have already done this phase 1 and expecting you for proposing the phase 2. read the RFP properly and propose your solution accordingly. Sustainability plan. CSR team incorporates understand that the change takes time and thus they may be happy to fund the project for multiple years, usually up to 3 years. Simultaneously, every CSR would like to see the initiative to continue post their support ends. Thus, your CSR project must have a clear exit plan along with details on how the initiative undertaken as part of the project would continue when the funding ceases. Towards this, your project must have opportunity to capacity build communities to continue the initiative, enterprising model to pay for services, and clear hand holding and handing over strategies. Before you submit, sharing some steps that I follow before submitting a proposal. Cross-check if you have covered all aspects. If there is an RFP, review it against the same. Do a spell check of the complete proposal. Check the font use. It should be well readable and it should be same all throughout. Paragraphs, page alignments, page numbers should be inserted. It should have a cover page, content page followed by the remaining content. All annexure should be covered as required. Give it to a copywriter. Budget checked by the finance team is extremely crucial. Post copy editing. Give it to the communications team and properly flow the complete document. Add a well written cover page to be submitted with the proposal. And lastly, request for acknowledgement. With this slide, we come to an end to the last chapter. Hope you enjoyed going through the complete course. Use this course as a guideline for submitting your CSR proposal.
At Funds for NGOs, we are committed to supporting nonprofits, social enterprises, and professionals like you in achieving sustainable growth through effective fundraising. Be sure to stay connected with Funds for NGOs for more resources, expert-led webinars, and updates to keep your organization at the forefront of fundraising success. Thank you for joining our How to Write an Effective Project Proposal for CSR Funding course. Together, let's create change and make an impact. For more valuable information, subscribe to our channel.